Hello, and welcome back to Tips and Time Savers. I'm Danny Rocks. This is part 3 of my new series, How to Record, Run, and Edit Macros in Microsoft Excel. In today's episode, I'm going to take you backstage, if you will. I'm going to examine and then later edit the actual VBA code that was written when we recorded the macros from the previous episode. VBA is short for Visual Basic for Applications. All right, let's begin. In the previous episode, I recorded 2 macros, company name 1 and company name 2. In the first instance, I neglected to change the referencing from absolute to relative. So on the developer tab on the ribbon over here in code, in most cases, you want to click on and use relative cell references. When I recorded the macro, I had absolute cell references selected. So notice over here that the active cell that I have before I run the macro is cell C6. What I was really hoping to accomplish was to have my company name and formatting entered into the active cell. Notice the keyboard shortcut, Control plus Shift plus N, and watch what happens, Control plus Shift plus N. Because I used absolute cell referencing, this macro, until I edit it, will always enter my company name and apply bold and italic formatting literally to cell A4. And sometimes that's what you want to happen. Now Control N will not undo the action, so let me use the delete key, and I also want to come over here and clear the formatting from that cell. So regardless of the cell, Control plus Shift plus N, my keyboard shortcut assigned to this, is always going to run the macro in cell A4. Now, in the second macro, company name 2, I turned on the relative cell references. And again, on the developer tab of the ribbon in code, click on the use relative references. And I recommend that you do that in most cases. Now, notice over here that I am in cell B14 when I run this macro. Control plus Shift plus A is the keyboard shortcut that I've assigned. So you see, it enters my company name and it applies the formatting in that cell. Control plus Shift plus A, the keyboard shortcut that I assigned. And so whatever my active cell is, the macro will perform those actions in the active cell or in the selected range. All right, before I take a look backstage, what I want to do is I want to clear the formatting as well as the content. Home tab of the ribbon, over here in the editing group, the drop down clear all. Once again, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go and clear all of the formatting. All right, now it's time to take a look at the VBA code that was written and we'll edit it. So developer tab on the ribbon and come over here and click on macros. That's one way to open up the macro list that we have over here. So company name 1, I want to edit it. So it's selected, I'm going to choose edit. Now over here, I have the actual VBA code that was written. Now I'll go into this in greater detail in a subsequent lesson, but all macros have 2 lines of text added automatically, whether we write the macro or whether we record it. The first line begins with sub. Sub stands for subroutine. And then we have a last line, which is end sub. And again, for the sub, notice that I have the name that I assigned to the macro. No spaces allowed when you name it. And also, just like a function or just like a formula, a left and a right parentheses. Now, here's the actual code. But before that, notice over here that we have an apostrophe and we also have green font. These are comments. So we can comment out or remark any line by putting an apostrophe there. So when we're editing, that's one of the elements that we're going to do. The text over here in the green font, this is again the information that we entered when we recorded the macro. The name of the macro and the keyboard shortcut that I assigned to it. All right, let's run the macro. Now before I do that, notice over here for the absolute cell reference in this macro, I have the active cell selected of B5. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to come up here and click debug rather than run because I want to walk through this step by step. Notice the keyboard shortcut is F8. So when I click to step into the macro or debug it, the first line is highlighted. Press F8 and you see it goes down to the first line of code. It bypasses anything that has an apostrophe in front of it. So now when I press F8, it's going to run this line of code. It's literally going to select a range, which is a specific cell, A4. So you see how the cursor moved up into cell A4. Now when I press F8, this time it's going to run this line of code. It's actually going to enter in my company name. And that, in fact, is what happened. F8, and now bold formatting is going to be turned on. So true means yes. And do I want to apply italic formatting? Yes. So also the macro wrote true. Click F8, and there it is. And now we have completed that macro. Now, let's take a look at macro number 2, and I want to select an active cell over here. This time I'm going to select cell A14. Let's bring back the code. So one way to do that, Developer tab, Macros, highlight the macro, and let's again choose Edit. Now down here, there is much more coding that's put in here, but the important part that I want to draw your attention to is rather than what we had in macro 1 with absolute cell reference, which is this line, range A4, select, notice down here with relative references, we have selection and then the formula to enter in that text. So you see, there's the major difference, and it's going to be really easy to have this work. Now, this code for macro 2 has quite a long list of code, and we'll clean this up in a subsequent lesson. But again, notice that I have a cell selected, A14, and this time I'm going to run macro number 2. There you go. Click over here, and let's run this macro again. Control-Shift-A, keyboard shortcut. There you go. Now, let's move back to the macro and let's edit it for the first macro and change it from an absolute cell reference into a relative reference. All right, let's again open up macros, select macro for company number 1, choose to edit, and all we have to do is apply an apostrophe. So we've remarked this out. Let's come back. Let's select a cell now and test it out. Control-Shift-N is the keyboard shortcut. And there you go. So you see how easy it was to change it from an absolute cell reference into a relative cell reference. Very, very easy. Let's just make one change to the second macro. Edit it. And this time I'm going to come up here in the formula, and inside the double quotations, I'm going to put different text. And you don't have to save your work with a macro. It's saved automatically. So now let's come down here and run the macro in cell A13. Control plus Shift plus A, and there you go. The way that we edit it. So there you've seen how easy it is to edit a macro. Very, very simple. Just open up the list of macros, and you can either step into it or click the edit and then see the code and then make any changes that you want. In this case, we remarked the first line of code out with the apostrophe, and it turned it into a relative cell reference. In the second macro, we changed the text for selection.formula R1C1, and you'll learn more about that in subsequent lessons. So thanks for watching, and I welcome your feedback. Send me your comments, Danny@thecompanyrocks.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.